Hey there, Jim and Cindy here from OUTAPocket. 6 months ago, we did a major electrical upgrade to our van using some EcoFlow products, and we did a series of videos showing exactly how we did it.
Over the last 6 months, we've used this in a variety of different scenarios, and we've learned a lot about these batteries. Some of our lessons learned were good lessons, and others
We
were
learned the hard way.
way.
But these EcoFlow products remain very popular. We thought we'd do a follow-up video to share with you some of these tips and lessons in case you're considering the system for your van or any other purpose.
We're going to cover 5 different scenarios that involve the batteries and let you know what we've learned.
I think this will be really useful if you're interested in these systems, so let's get to it.
Indeed. All right. The first scenario involves one of the big reasons why we got the system in the first place, and that's the ability to feed supplemental power into the house batteries so we can do things like run things off of the 12-volt system all night long if we want to. If you want to run your Starlink all night long to monitor your security cameras, or if you're doing really any power-hungry activity and you don't want to drain down the house batteries when there's not a ready supply of solar or shore power.
This scenario involves feeding supplemental power from the EcoFlow batteries through the alternator charger using what's called reverse charge mode, and from there into the house batteries.
You can see here that we're off of shore power and we're running off of the house batteries, and you'll notice that it runs anywhere from 12.4 to 12.7 volts. Now we're going to kick in the EcoFlow system.
To start feeding power from the EcoFlow batteries into the house batteries, you open up the EcoFlow app, pull up the alternator charger, make sure you're in reverse charge mode, and then simply say, start working. Give it a moment and you'll see the power feed. There you go. We're feeding 458 watts, 516 watts, and you can also see we're getting voltage from the alternator charger.
Back at the ZAMP charge controller where we monitor the voltage going into the van, you can see it's up to 14 volts, which is coming directly from the EcoFlow system.
The lesson learned from using the system in this configuration is that the voltage from the EcoFlow is at a much higher voltage than the native voltage of the house batteries. What that means is that all the power is being drawn from the EcoFlow batteries, not the house batteries in this configuration. The house batteries are basically being continually kept at full charge by the EcoFlow system. So if you're running this overnight, you're just draining the EcoFlow batteries, and the house batteries are staying charged. So you need to keep your eye on that, and if the EcoFlow system is getting low, you need to turn that off and fall back on the fully charged house batteries for the rest of your power needs.
Scenario number 2 involved the sun. We had a question. Can we recharge the EcoFlow batteries using the solar panels without having a direct wire from the panels to the EcoFlow batteries through its solar inputs? And it turns out the answer is
yes. You can see right now we're in some bright sun. The solar panels are completely lit up. We're generating power from the solar panels, feeding it into the house batteries at 13.2 volts, now 13.3 volts. This scenario involves using supplemental solar capacity coming from the charge controller into the house batteries to actually feed through the alternator charger in normal alternator charging mode and feed that extra power to help recharge the EcoFlow batteries. Within the EcoFlow app, looking at the alternator charger, I have it set to normal charge mode, and it's turned on and working, and it's actually pulling in this case, 130 watts of power from the solar panels as if the solar panels were an alternator. So that excess power from the solar panels is actually helping to recharge the EcoFlow battery system. This is a really cool configuration for the system. The lesson learned, I'll say, is that this can be a little glitchy. Sometimes the voltage will fall below 13 volts and it'll stop charging. This alternator charger sometimes will reset itself when you're doing this. It's not the most reliable, but it does work, and in the bright sun like this, we're actually getting good power.
scenario number 3 involves recharging the EcoFlow batteries using the car's alternator when it's running.
This scenario involves using the engine alternator when the engine is running, feeding power through the solenoid to recharge the house batteries, but further feeding through the alternator charger in charge mode to recharge the EcoFlow battery system. With the engine running and the alternator providing power to the whole van and all the systems, you can see we're at 14.4 volts. It's actually the highest input voltage of pretty much anything connected to this electrical system. In this configuration, we have plenty of power coming in And if we look at the app, with the engine running and the alternator putting out power, now I have the ECOFLOW alternator charger turned on in normal charge mode. Currently I have it set for a maximum of 300 watts charging, and you can see it's drawing that power from the alternator. You can adjust how much power it takes, all the way up to 800 watts. You can also adjust the voltage that triggers the alternator charger. The one thing you don't want to do, which is an important lesson learned, is you don't want to drop that voltage to really below 13. If it's above 13, you're getting power from a source like solar panel, alternator charger. If it's below 13, you run the risk of drawing power off the house batteries, which is what you do not want to do. Another lesson learned is that you want to be careful not to pull too much power off the alternator at the same time. The house batteries will charge off the alternator, and with this device you can charge the ECOFLOW off the alternator. If you have all of those maxed out at the same time, you could put too much load on the alternator. So what we tend to do is give the house batteries a chance to charge when we start driving. When it looks like they're full, then we turn this on, usually set it to 3, 4, I've had it up to 500 watts, just to give the alternator a chance to produce the power without maxing out.
Scenario number 4 involves the second big reason why we got the EcoFlow system, and that's the ability to power our 120-volt system when we're boondocking and off the grid. So we can boil water for our coffee, reheat that breakfast sandwich we picked up the day before, and browse the internet to figure out what we're going to be doing the next day.
This scenario involves powering the 120-volt systems in the van when you're not on shore power, so feeding 120-volt output into the breaker panel to power all the outlets so that you can use an air fryer, a water heater, or a computer power supply cord, anything that requires 120 volts off-grid. To enable the 120-volt feed into the van, I go into the Delta 2 Max battery, go to the output, and I see AC output here. I hit that. That feeds 120-volt power into the transfer switch, and thus into the whole power panel of the van. You can see we're actually sucking up quite a bit of power here. That's because by default I'm also powering the 12-volt converter in the panel to recharge the house batteries. I don't need to do that because that's very inefficient, as we explained before. So we'll turn that converter off while we're running the 120-volt system. The lesson learned using this configuration is that you really don't want to be powering the 12-volt converter all the time. It's just a really inefficient use of your power. That's why we turned the 12-volt converter off. However, the Solis Pocket, the way it comes from the factory, that 12-volt converter is on the same circuit breaker as a bunch of the outlets that you're trying to use in this configuration. We did a whole video on how to isolate that 12-volt converter so you can turn it off independently of the outlets.
Scenario 5, we're back from boondocking. It's time to plug in the Pocket after we've used our 120-volt system to reheat our coffee and had a great time. We plug in. Now, you may be wondering why this is scenario 5. It's kind of an easy thing to plug in. Yeah, things can go wrong.
This scenario involves when you get back home or you get to a campground or something and you have external shore power and you're using that to feed all the systems and recharge the house batteries.
Now we're checking the ZAMP charge controller and we look and see, wait a minute, it's supposed to be reading 13.7 on shore power, but it's still reading 12.6. That means it's still running off of the house batteries and something went wrong.
The reason it's only at 12.6 volts is because when we got home we forgot to turn the 12-volt converter back on the panel.
Now it's at 14 volts. I can't believe we did that.
What happened was, when we were boondocking, we were feeding the outlets through 120 volts, and we turned off the converter because we didn't want to waste power trying to recharge the house batteries through this conversion process, so we turned that off. When we came home, plugged into shore power, powering the whole van, we forgot to turn that back on. So what happened was the house batteries just kept draining and draining and draining. They couldn't be recharged even though we were plugged into shore power. The big lesson learned on this one is when you get home, turn everything back on the way it's supposed to be. We did not do that, and the van sat for like a week, and I started to hear this funny beeping coming from inside the van. Upon investigation, it was the propane sensor alarm going off saying it was low voltage and giving me a warning. I checked the ZAMP panel, it was just under 6 volts, so We screwed up. It's on us. We forgot to do it, but it's a big lesson learned to do this when you get home from your trip. I hope we didn't do any damage to the batteries. They seem to be working fine again now that they're charged up, but it's not something you want to do is run your batteries down that low. So, lesson learned. The EcoFlow system has been a great upgrade for the van.
We learned a lot of lessons along the way, which has made it even better.
Some of the lessons we unfortunately learned the hard way.
Yeah, I'd like to avoid that.
But keep your eye out if you found these useful. We're going to do some other videos covering other lessons learned, covering other upgrades we've made to the van.
Feel free to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and drop us a line, drop us some comments. I'd love to learn from your lessons learned.
Till then, we'll see you next time.
See you next time.